My multimillionaire father has a disturbing way of testing the men I date. He leaves a $60,000 watch in the bathroom to see if they'll take it. To the outside world, my father is a philanthropist and a business legend. But inside our mansion, he's a paranoid man who believes everyone has a price, especially the men I bring home. He's convinced that any man I date is just a gold digger in disguise, waiting for the right moment to grab a piece of his empire. He's already ruined 3 of my relationships using this test. The first one was a doctor. The second was a lawyer. The third was a business owner. All of them saw the watch, and all of them failed. One tried to hide it. One said he never saw it. The third touched it, and then lied. My father always did the same thing after. He would walk back into the dining room with that slight smile, pull out his phone, and show the GPS tracker on the watch. Then he would throw them out. Always before dessert. At first, I used to cry, but after the third time, I understood something. My father didn't want me to be happy. He wanted to be right. Then I met Caleb. Caleb was different. He teaches history at a public high school and spends his weekends volunteering at a community kitchen. He lives in a small studio apartment and drives a car that's older than mine. When I told my father I was bringing Caleb to dinner, he didn't even look up from his newspaper. "I'll have the watch ready," he said. I felt my chest tighten. "Please stop doing this," I told him. "Caleb isn't interested in your money." My father just laughed. "Everyone cares about money, sweetheart," he said. "Some people are just better at hiding it than others." The night of the dinner felt heavy. We sat in the formal dining room, surrounded by gold-framed portraits and crystal chandeliers. My father was unusually quiet, watching Caleb carefully. Caleb didn't seem to notice. Or if he did, he didn't show it. He cut his food calmly and ate without any rush. "Is it good?" I asked, just to say something. "It's really good," he said. "Who cooked this?" I told him it was the same woman who had been working for us for years. He nodded. "You can tell she cares," he said, and kept eating. Simple. That was Caleb. Halfway through dinner, my father stood up. He said he needed to check something and walked toward the hallway. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was placing the watch. That same $60,000 watch, right on the edge of the sink in the guest bathroom. I stayed sitting across from Caleb, holding my fork, feeling that familiar pressure in my chest, that feeling when you already know exactly what's about to happen, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The dining room felt too quiet after that. The chandelier light reflected on the table, on the glasses, on the framed portraits around us. Everything looked exactly the same as always, but I could feel it. That tension. That moment right before everything falls apart. Caleb finished his plate and leaned back slightly, his eyes moving toward one of the portraits on the wall. "Who is that?" he asked, nodding toward an old painting in a gold frame. "My great-grandfather," I said. "He came here with nothing." Caleb looked at it for a few seconds. "Your dad keeps it there to remember that?" "I'm not sure," I said. "Sometimes I think he only remembers what he has now." Caleb looked at me. He didn't say anything right away, but something in his expression shifted. Not pity, something closer to understanding. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. I was lying. He didn't push it. That was also Caleb. He knew when to stop. A few minutes later, my father came back into the room. He walked in like always, like everything was under control before he even sat down. He adjusted his napkin, picked up his glass, everything precise. "Sorry about that," he said. "Something I had to check." "No problem," Caleb replied. My father looked at him. It was a quick look, but complete, like he could read everything about someone in a few seconds. "Caleb," my father said, in that tone that sounds casual but isn't, "how long have you been teaching?" 8 years. Always history?" "Yes. Doesn't it get repetitive?" Caleb placed his glass down. "No," he said. "The students change every year. The subject stays the same, but the questions don't." My father smiled. That same small smile. The one he uses when he thinks he understands someone. Dinner continued. My father kept asking questions that sounded normal on the surface. About salary, about future plans, about whether he ever thought of doing something more profitable. The kind of questions that weren't really questions. Caleb answered all of them calmly. No defensiveness. No effort to impress. He spoke like someone who didn't need approval. And I could feel my father noticing that. Then Caleb excused himself. He stood up and said he was going to the bathroom. And just like that, everything inside me went still. My father slowly reached for his phone under the table. I saw the screen light up. The tracking app was already open. His fingers stayed there. waiting. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The entire room felt frozen. Somewhere in the house, I heard a faint noise from the kitchen. One of the chandelier lights flickered slightly, then steadied again. Time stretched. 1 minute, 2, 3, 4. Then Caleb came back. He sat down, adjusted his napkin, took a sip of water, and continued eating, like nothing had happened, because for him, nothing had. I looked at my father. His eyes were fixed on his phone. Then I saw it. A small change in his expression, barely noticeable, a slight frown. He moved his finger across the screen, looked again. Then slowly, he put the phone away, carefully, controlled. But something was off. Something had changed. More wine? I asked. Yes, he said. His voice was flat. Too flat. We finished dinner in silence. My father barely spoke for the last 20 minutes. Caleb didn't react. He stayed the same. Calm, quiet, present, like he had nothing to prove. When we stood up and walked to the entrance, my father followed us. That alone was unusual. He walked Caleb to the door, shook his hand, said the dinner had been a pleasure. Caleb thanked him. Then he turned to me, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, and stepped outside. It was lightly raining. He didn't hesitate. He just walked toward his car, parked a few houses down. My father and I stood there, watching the car disappear down the street. The air smelled like rain. "Good night," my father said, and then he walked away. No smile, no phone, no explanation, just silence. I stayed there for a moment without moving. 3 relationships destroyed. 3 men thrown out before dessert. 3 nights of me crying alone while my father sat in his office, satisfied. This time was different. There was no confrontation, no proof, no speech, just nothing. I went upstairs slowly. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief either. What I felt was something else, something uncomfortable, like winning something without knowing exactly what I had won or what it was going to cost me. Because I knew my father, and I knew that silence like that was never the end of anything. It was the beginning. The next morning, I went downstairs at 8. My father was already at the table. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the fact that he wasn't reading the newspaper. He had both hands wrapped around his coffee cup, looking out at the garden. For a second, I didn't recognize the expression on his face. It took me a moment to understand why. I had never seen him like that before. He wasn't calculating. He was thinking. I sat down. The coffee was placed in front of me without me asking. Outside, the garden still looked wet from the rain the night before. "Good morning," I said. "Good morning," he replied. Silence. I poured my coffee. Took a sip. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Yes. You?" "Not really." He didn't say anything else. Neither did I. We sat there for almost 10 minutes without speaking. That wasn't completely unusual. But this silence felt different. Normally, there was always something filling the space. The newspaper, his phone, the low sound of the news playing somewhere in the background. This time, there was nothing. When I finished my coffee, I stood up to leave. "Caleb didn't touch the watch," my father said. I stopped. I didn't turn around right away. "No," I said. "The tracker showed it stayed in the bathroom the entire time he was there." He added, "I know." I turned to face him. He was still looking out at the garden. "How long have you been seeing him?" he asked. 3 months. "And in that time, he never asked you for anything?" "No." "Money, help, connections, nothing?" My father nodded slowly, like he was confirming something he already suspected, but still needed to hear out loud. He took another sip of coffee, then placed the cup down carefully. "I'm going to look into him," he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a warning. It was just information. "Okay," I said. I didn't argue. There was no point. He was going to do it anyway, with or without my approval. The difference this time was that I wasn't pretending it wasn't happening. Caleb called me later that afternoon. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm okay. You?" "Good. I have a stack of tests to grade and my heater stopped working. But other than that, I'm good." I smiled. I couldn't help it. "How was dinner for you?" I asked. There was a short pause. "Your father is an interesting man," he said. "That's a very polite way to put it." "He's smart," Caleb said. "And he doesn't trust easily." I didn't respond right away. "He usually has a reason for that," Caleb added. That stayed in my head longer than I expected. Did it bother you? I asked. No, he said. He asked questions. I answered honestly. Another pause. If that's not enough for him, that's his problem. Not mine. He didn't sound angry. Not even annoyed. Just certain. And that told me more about him than anything else he could have said. My father took 4 days to tell me what he found. He asked me to come into his office on a Thursday afternoon. That was his way of making things formal. The room smelled like wood and old books. There was a thin folder on his desk. I sat across from him. I looked into him, he said. I figured. No debts, no history of problems, no connections to anyone in my business world. He paused. No significant assets either. His car is over 10 years old. He rents. His savings are modest. I already knew that. What you didn't know, he said, opening the folder, is this. He slid a sheet of paper toward me. It was a list. Names, 22 of them, with dates next to each one, and short notes written beside them. They're his students, my father said. From the last 8 years. He stayed in contact with them after they graduated. I kept looking at the page. Some of them had problems at home, he continued. Some were at risk of dropping out. He tapped the paper lightly. He followed up with them on his own time, without being asked, without being paid. I didn't say anything. I also found 3 letters from families thanking him, my father added, and a local recognition he never even went to pick up. I looked up at him. I expected something, a conclusion, a judgment, but his face didn't show either. What I saw instead was something I had never seen before. Confusion. The kind that comes from someone who spent years believing they understood how the world works, and just found something that doesn't fit. So? I asked. So nothing, he said. I just thought you should know. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. I already knew, I said. I didn't need someone to look into him. I stood up, walked toward the door, then stopped, because there was something I had been holding in for too long. You ruined 3 of my relationships with that watch, I said. I didn't turn around. The doctor, the lawyer, the businessman, you threw them out before dessert. I cried 3 times in my room while you sat in your office, convinced you were doing the right thing. Silence behind me. This time, the watch stayed exactly where you left it, I continued. And you're still looking for a reason to be right. I opened the door. I'm not going to wait for your approval to live my life anymore. I stepped out, closed the door behind me. I stood there in the hallway for a moment, my hand still on the handle, waiting. For something. Footsteps. A drawer opening. Anything. There was nothing. Just silence. My father didn't mention Caleb for 2 weeks. That alone was new. After the other 3, there was always something the next day. A comment, a question, a remark disguised as concern. Something to remind me that his judgment was still there, hanging over everything. This time, nothing. We had breakfast together. Sometimes dinner. We talked about normal things. House matters, his foundation, small routines. But Caleb's name never came up. Not once. My father was capable of many things, but silence like that was the hardest one to read. I didn't know if it meant he had let it go, or if he was still processing it. I didn't bring it up either. I waited. What I did notice was that he started leaving earlier in the mornings, coming back later at night. Some days, he looked different. Not tired. Something else. Something harder to name. Twice, I found him in the library holding a book he clearly wasn't reading. The page hadn't changed. The shift became real on a Saturday morning. I was in the garden with a cup of coffee when he walked out through the side door. He didn't notice me at first. He sat down under the tree and made a call. I wasn't trying to listen, but the garden was quiet, and my father has never been a quiet man when he's focused. I need you to tell me more about that program, he said. Pause. The one you mentioned, the one for students at risk of dropping out. I froze. No, I'm not interested in anything business-related, he continued. I just want to understand how it works. Another pause. And the teacher running it, how long has he been doing it? I didn't move, didn't even take a sip of my coffee. I see, he said. And the results? Are they real? Can they be confirmed? Pause. Send me what you have. He hung up, put his phone away, and then he saw me. His expression shifted, not quite embarrassment, more like discomfort. Like he wasn't ready to explain what he had just done. How long have you been there? He asked. Since before you came out. He nodded, didn't react. You know your boyfriend runs a program for students at risk of dropping out? He said. Yes. He gets results, my father said. 43 students in 4 years who were expected to drop out didn't. I know. He looked at me. Why didn't you tell me? I held his gaze. Because it wouldn't have changed anything for you, I said. Your problem with him was never about whether he was a good person. I paused. It was about money. My father didn't respond right away. That's not entirely fair, he said finally. Then tell me what is. He stood up, walked a few steps across the wet grass, stopped with his back to me. When I was younger, he said, I trusted someone I shouldn't have. I stayed quiet. I lost a lot, he continued, not just money. A pause. After that, I learned to verify before I trust. That's not the same thing, I said. The men I dated weren't your business partners. I know. And you treated them like they were. I know. That was the first time I had ever heard him say that without arguing, without justifying it, just stating it. Who was it? I asked. It doesn't matter. It does. I stood up. Because you're using what that person did to you to judge everyone else. I paused, including Caleb, who has nothing to do with that. My father turned to look at me. His expression wasn't defensive. It wasn't cold. Maybe, he said. 2 words. That was all. But coming from him, it was more than I expected. He walked back inside without saying anything else. I stayed in the garden. My coffee had gone cold. Something had changed. Not everything. Not enough. But something real. And in that house, that mattered. 3 days after that conversation in the garden, my father asked me to have dinner with him. That by itself wasn't unusual. We had dinner together several times a week. What was different was how he asked. He stood at my bedroom door around 6 in the evening, knocked lightly even though it was already open. Would you have dinner with me tonight? He said. It didn't sound like his usual tone. Usually it was more like a statement disguised as a question. This time, it was an actual question. Yes, I said. We didn't eat in the main dining room. We ate in the smaller one. That was also different. The large dining room was for guests, for appearances, for control. The smaller one was where we used to eat when it was just family. I hadn't been there in years. Not since my mother was still alive. It was a simple room. A table for 4, 2 windows facing the side garden. A warm light that felt different from the rest of the house. Dinner was simple too. Soup, chicken, salad, nothing formal. My father waited until we were alone before he started talking. When I was 28, he said, I had a business partner. I didn't interrupt. His name was Victor, he continued. We had been friends since college. He paused. We built my first real business together. 3 years of work, no breaks, no weekends. I stayed quiet. In the 3rd year, when things finally started working, Victor sold his share. He looked down at his plate, to a competitor. I felt my chest tighten slightly. He didn't tell me, my father said. He negotiated everything in secret. Another pause. The night he signed the deal, he called me. That's how I found out. I didn't say anything. And after that? I asked. My control over the company was gone, he said. They used his position to block every decision I tried to make. He took a slow breath. I had no choice but to sell my part too, at a price they decided. Silence. I lost 5 years of work, he said, and almost everything I had. What about him? I asked. He took his payment and disappeared, my father said. I never heard from him again. The room went quiet. What was worse? I asked. The money? Or him? My father didn't answer immediately. What stayed with me, he said finally, was that I didn't see it coming. He looked at me. I thought I knew him. We had dinners together, built everything side by side. I even stood next to him at his wedding. He paused, and I still didn't see it. I let that sit for a moment. So that's why you do it? I asked. The watch? That's why, he said. Another pause. After that, I started testing people before trusting them. In business and in life. That's not the same thing, I said. The men I dated weren't your partners. I know. And you still treated them like they were. I know. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, just said it. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. He put his fork down, looked straight at me. Because what you said in the garden was right, he said. I've been using what happened to me to judge people who have nothing to do with it. I stayed quiet. And Caleb? I asked. My father leaned back slightly. He didn't react like anyone else I've tested, he said. He didn't touch the watch. He didn't try to impress me. He didn't lie. A pause. And when I looked into him, he stopped for a second. I found someone who has been doing the same thing for years without anyone asking him to. Another pause. That doesn't fit into anything I understand. I watched him carefully. So he doesn't fit your categories, I said. No, my father said. He doesn't. We finished dinner without saying much after that, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't full of things unsaid. It was just quiet. The kind of quiet that happens after something real has been said. After dinner, my father reached into his jacket and took something out. He placed it on the table between us. It was a small photograph, old, slightly worn at the edges. Victor and me, he said. The day we opened the business. I picked it up. He looked younger, different. He was smiling in a way I had never seen before. I've kept it in my desk for 30 years, he said. I don't know why I never threw it away. I looked at the picture for a few more seconds, then placed it back on the table. Why are you showing me this? I asked. He leaned back slightly. So you understand something, he said. I wasn't always like this. There was no defense in his voice, no attempt to justify himself, just a statement. And so you know, he continued, that I was wrong. I felt something shift in my chest. With the other three, he said. I don't know if they were good men or not. A pause. I never gave them the chance to show it. I didn't answer right away. It was too much to respond to immediately. I'm not asking you to forget that, I said finally. I'm asking you not to repeat it. My father nodded. Once, slowly. That was enough. I stood up, said goodnight, went upstairs. Inside my room, I sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the light. The house was quiet. The garden outside was dark. I thought about calling Caleb, but I didn't. That conversation could wait. I needed to sit with what had just happened. My father had admitted he was wrong, without being pushed, without turning it into an argument. It was something small, and at the same time, it wasn't small at all. It depended on how you looked at it, and I still didn't know exactly how to look at it yet. The next day, I met Caleb at the same small restaurant where we had our first date. Nothing fancy. Same wooden tables, same handwritten menu. He ordered the same thing as the first time. That was something I liked about him. He didn't change things just to make an impression. I told him everything. About my father, about Victor, about the dinner. He listened without interrupting, completely focused. No distractions, no impatience. When I finished, he stayed quiet for a moment. How do you feel about it? He asked. I don't know, I said. Better than before, but not completely okay. Why not? He asked. I took a breath. Because I spent years waiting for my father to trust me, I said. And now that he finally does something different, I paused. It's not because he trusted me. It's because you passed his test. Caleb nodded slowly. That's fair, he said. I looked at him. Fair how? I asked. That you feel that way, he said. I studied his face for a second. And you? I asked. How do you feel about all this? He picked up his glass of water, held it for a moment before answering. There's something I didn't tell you, he said. Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. What? I asked. The watch, he said. I saw it. Everything around me seemed to slow down. You saw it? I repeated. Yes. And you didn't touch it? No. Why didn't you tell me? He set the glass down. Because it wasn't important at the time, he said. And if I had told you that night, the whole conversation would have become about the watch, instead of what actually mattered. I stared at him. And what actually mattered? I asked. That your father left something valuable there to see if I would take it, he said. And I didn't. A pause. That's it. I leaned back slightly. But there is more to it, I said. If you didn't take it because you knew it was a test, that's different from not taking it because it simply wasn't yours. He shook his head. I didn't take it because it wasn't mine, he said. I held his gaze. If it hadn't been a test, you still wouldn't have touched it? No. Silence. How do I know that? I asked. You don't, he said. Then he looked at me, just like I don't know everything about you. A pause. Trust doesn't come from tests, he said. It comes from time. I didn't answer, but I felt something settle inside me. We walked out of the restaurant without finishing the meal, not because we were upset, just because I needed space to think. The air outside was cold. Not freezing, but enough to make you notice it. We walked half a block without saying anything. Are you upset? Caleb asked. I'm thinking, I said. About what? The fact that you knew something and didn't tell me, I said. He nodded. Do you wish I had told you earlier? He asked. I stopped walking, looked at him. I don't know, I said honestly. I think I do. I took a breath. If we're going to build something real, I don't want there to be things one of us knows and the other doesn't. You're right, he said. Then why now? I asked. Why tell me now and not before? He didn't answer immediately. Because before, your father was the center of the problem, he said. A pause. Now, it's us. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? I mean that if we're going to move forward, he said, you need to know that I saw the watch. And it didn't change anything. I looked at him. Why didn't it change anything? I asked. He shrugged lightly. Because I don't need $60,000, he said. I need a life that makes sense when I wake up in the morning. He paused. And that's not something you find in a bathroom sink. I didn't respond. Not because I disagreed, but because there wasn't anything to add. We kept walking. At the corner, he stopped. One more thing, he said. What? If your father ever wants to talk to me again, he said. I'd prefer it without the watch this time. It wasn't exactly a joke. But there was something light in the way he said it. I let out a short laugh. More relief than anything else. I'll tell him, I said. Good. We stood there for a second. Then he nodded, turned, and walked away. Same calm pace. Hands in his pockets. No need to look back. I watched him go. On the drive back home, I kept thinking about everything. He had seen the watch. He knew exactly what it meant. And still, he didn't react. Didn't take it. Didn't even bring it up. And somehow, that made me trust him more. Because that kind of thing can't be faked. When I got home, I found my father in the hallway. He had a glass of water in his hand. Caleb said something, I told him. My father stopped. Looked at me. What? He asked. He said that if you want to talk to him again, he'd prefer it without the watch. A pause. He knows about it, my father asked. Yes. Another pause. And he told you he saw it? He asked. Yes. My father stayed quiet for a few seconds. From the beginning? He asked. Yes. He nodded slowly. Then he turned and walked toward his room. He didn't say anything else. I stayed there in the hallway. Part of me wondered if I had been too direct, too honest. But at the same time, that was the point. For the first time, I wasn't trying to manage my father. I was talking to him like an adult, and that changed everything. 3 weeks later, my father called Caleb. He didn't tell me before, only after. I came home one afternoon and found both of them sitting in the garden. Caleb noticed me first. He raised his hand slightly, calm. Like sitting there with my father was completely normal. My father turned. His expression was different. Not warm, but not hostile either. I invited him to talk, my father said. I nodded. I can see that. I sat down. A third cup appeared on the table without anyone asking. For a moment, none of us spoke. It should have felt awkward, but it didn't. It just was. We sat in the garden for a while without saying anything. Then my father spoke. I was telling Caleb about the foundation, he said. I looked at Caleb. He asked if I knew students who might qualify, Caleb said. I told him I have a few in mind. I nodded slightly. And? I asked. I also told him something else, Caleb added. My father leaned back in his chair. He said the program is good, my father said, but the application process is too complicated. A pause. Too many steps. Too much time. I looked at my father, and he's right, he added. That caught my attention. It's been the same process for years, my father continued. We never questioned it. I stayed quiet. It was the first time I had ever heard him say that someone outside his world was right about something he built. The conversation continued. They talked for almost 40 minutes, about the program, about students, about what works and what doesn't. My father asked direct questions. Caleb answered with clarity. Neither of them was trying to impress the other, and for the first time, it felt real. When Caleb left, I walked him to the gate. Are you okay? He asked. Yes, I said. I think so. He nodded. This is a good step, he said. I watched him walk away. Then I went back to the garden. My father was still sitting there. Why did you call him? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Because I wanted to talk to him without the dinner, he said. Without everything else. A pause. And because I owed him an apology, I looked at him. You apologized? I asked. Yes. How did he react? My father picked up his cup, even though it was already empty. He said he understood, he said. A pause. And then he went back to talking about the program. I let out a small breath. That sounds like him, I said. My father nodded. Yes, he said. I'm starting to see that. Silence. I'm not going to ask you to forgive me for the other 3, he said. I looked at him. I don't have the right to ask that. Another pause. But I do think about it, he added. I studied his face for a second. Not every day, I said. Something in his expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. No, he admitted. Not every day. We sat there a little longer. Nothing else needed to be said. 6 months later, Caleb and I moved in together. It wasn't a dramatic decision. We didn't sit down and plan it. It just happened. We were already spending most of our time in the same place. At some point, it didn't make sense to keep 2 separate apartments. The place we chose was small, much smaller than the house I grew up in. A simple kitchen, a living room with a window facing the street, 1 bedroom. That was it. My father came to see it one afternoon, alone. He walked through the apartment slowly, didn't comment at first. He stopped by the window, looked outside at the street, cars parked along the curb, trees, a small store on the corner. It's small, he said. I know. He turned slightly. Are you happy here? Yes. He nodded. Then he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he reached into his jacket, took something out, and placed it on the table near the entrance. The watch. The same one. I looked at it, then at him. I'm not going to need it anymore, he said. I didn't answer right away. I don't want it, I said. I'm not giving it to you, he replied. A pause. I'm showing it to you. He looked at the watch for a moment. Tomorrow, I'm donating it to the foundation, he said. They're going to auction it. I blinked. The money will go to the scholarship program. I looked at him. That was Caleb's idea, he added. Then he left. No speech, no drama. Just that. I stood there for a moment with the watch on the table, then I picked it up, held it for a few seconds, and placed it back down. After that, I went into the kitchen. Caleb was finishing dinner. The watch is on the table, I said. He didn't look up. It's not mine, he said. I know. I sat down by the window. But it was your idea, I added. He shrugged slightly. Someone had to turn it into something useful, he said. I looked outside, at the street, at the quiet movement of everything around us. I didn't feel like I had won anything. There was no victory, no moment of revenge, just something simpler. I chose the right person, and eventually, everything else found its place.